Hello learners, welcome to this session on information processing and retrieval. I am Jaideep Sharma from the School of Social Sciences, and we have been discussing information processing and retrieval for the past two sessions, and this is the third session in the series. This is regarding course MLII 102, Information Processing and Retrieval, and this might be useful for our BLI students also for BLI 223 course. Now we have been discussing the particular course, and we started with the first session wherein we discussed how we talk about the intellectual processing of information, because this course involves intellectual processing. So we talked of intellectual organization of information, why indexing is not merely a mechanical job. It involves intellectual organization, it involves using the intellect, though we are using automated indexing also these days. In fact, most of the indexing these days is automated because we are searching information which is digital in nature, but then the base for it is intellectual, and we need to discuss the theoretical details. We have been talking about manual indexing. We'll move on little late on to the automatic indexing, and we'll talk about the tools and techniques. In the last session, we had discussed about indexing and indexing languages. We had just initiated, and we will recapitulate a little bit about what we discussed in the last session, and then we'll move on further to continue our discussions. Last time we had talked about indexing language, and we had seen that indexing language is used to analyze, represent, and also display the subject that is the subject of a document. It could be a document, it could be a surrogate, and this is how we do. Now, a little bit going further behind it, when we have to index, if you have a piece of document with you, maybe it is a book or it is an article or any other piece of information, if you think of indexing it, the easiest to index is that you just prepare a list of the terms that have been used, and you try to put them in a particular order and show the location of those terms also. And this could be the easiest way to index. But if you, as a reader, as a searcher, or as a user of that piece of information, try to use this index that you have prepared, you will find that it is merely a listing. You will not be able to really lay hands on a particular piece of information that may be in your mind, or maybe just trying to browse through. You will find that this index is not very useful. You would have seen different examples of indices. Like, you all know that concordance is one. In concordance, you do this only, that you try to make a list of words and how often they have occurred there in that piece of information, and try to give a location to all those occurrences. So that is what is a concordance. Similarly, if you prepare an index, this index could also be prepared in this way, that you try to prepare the list of terms that are there, and you try to maybe sift out these terms, maybe leave those terms which you feel are not important. Maybe these are the parts of speech, or maybe conjunctions, prepositions, or articles. You leave out to index them, and you just use the meaningful terms that have been used, and we call them keywords or descriptors, and give their locations. So this is another way. But then you would have seen very sophisticated indexes where you present the context also of those terms. And how do you prepare such an index? How do you give the context? That is really something which we need to think about. Before discussing this context, another thing that we had discussed earlier also was that one should be knowing about that subject, that information pertains to a particular field of knowledge. One should be an expert. One should be aware of that field. One should know what is that field, what is that subject, what are the related subjects, that one should have a knowledge about that. That is also a question at times posed to us that who should prepare an index, whether it is an author who should prepare an index, or it should be an expert in that field who prepares an index, or it is an indexer who prepares an index. In fact, there are different pros and cons regarding this, and you would have seen that everyone does it, but then the best is a combination of these three qualities. When you say author, generally an author does not like to prepare an index, but then there are at times you need feedback of an author also. Why do you say that? Because when you present a piece of information, you have ideas while you convey your ideas in language. So those ideas may not be as clear to anyone else other than the author. So that is the reason why we feel the author should prepare an index. So while a person who is preparing an index is doing so, he should know what goes in the mind of the author who has penned that piece of information, who has written that. What is there at the back of his mind when he is putting that ideas in terms? So it is here that indexing is important. It is not merely those terms. The concepts behind those terms are very important. So one of the types of indexing is, as we had discussed last time also, is where we had stopped last time, is the assigned indexing, and the last time we had talked of two types of indexing. The one is the derived indexing, as you see here on the screen, and the other is the assigned indexing. So derived indexing is little easier in the sense that we make use of the terms that have been used by the author, whereas in the assigned indexing you go behind those terms and you think of the concepts that have been conveyed by those terms. So this is how indexing has been divided into two types. But again, when you talk of derived indexing, it is also not that easy, because you just need not to put those words in a particular order and prepare the index, because here also in a different way indexing has been defined as natural language indexing, it is free language indexing, and it is the third is that you say it is a little not that free or natural language, it is controlled indexing. So when you talk of natural language indexing, you refer to the type of indexing where the words that have been used by the author, these have been used in the index. Whereas when you say controlled indexing, it is just the opposite. You go behind those terms and you try to understand the concepts and related concepts also, and put them in the index by studying the meanings of those words, by the context of those words, and also relationship between those terms that have been used in the text. Whereas when you talk of free indexing, there you take care of those words and you so it is somewhere in between natural language and the controlled indexing. So what is there in controlled indexing that is so difficult? And I said that even if you are using the derived indexing, if you use the derived indexing, it is not merely that you take those words, you have to identify the keywords and you have to provide access through those keywords. So what is it that one should be adept at while preparing an index? One is that, as I said, that you should know the field, and while knowing the field, the three components in indexing, as we had discussed in our last lecture, was also that it is semantics, it is syntax, and it is syntactics. So we had said that when you say that you are thinking of the concepts behind those terms, it is what is called as semantics. And when these words are there along with other terms and conveying certain meanings, that is what is the syntax, as we talk of syntax in linguistics also. Now, when you have a piece of information with you, when you have a document with you which you have to index, you have not merely to think about those terms that have been used in the index. You have also to think about the different other terms also related to that subject, and also the context in which those terms have to be used. So that is very important as an indexer. So it is here that the theory of indexing has been developed. It is here that we have the different indexing languages, the different indexing tools. And we have discussed earlier also that when we talk of indexing languages, these have been a development over classificatory languages or languages used for classification, where it is pure notation because the purpose is arranging those documents only, particularly the physical surrogates of those documents or documents per se, whether it is catalog records or books or other forms of information. So that is notation that we use. But in case of an index, it is their verbal equivalents that are used, and there are issues with the verbal equivalents because the language has its own issues, and that issue is because of the flexibility in the language. The flexibility is because we can represent the same concept in different ways, and that is the flexibility of the language. But when you talk of controlled indexing or you talk of controlled vocabulary, every indexing language has its own vocabulary, and the control is required because there has to be a one-to-one relation between what you express and what the author has meant for that, and the searcher should also understand the same way. So there are three different set of people who are involved here. One is the one who has penned down that information, the author or creator of that information, and it is for the reader who wants to have access to that information, and it is here the indexer who lies in between these two sets of people. Now the indexer has to understand this person who has authored it, has to understand the views that have been expressed in this document, and also should understand how the searcher would approach this information. The mismatch between these two, or maybe the inability of the searcher to understand the indexing system, affects the recall and precision of the information that has been retrieved. Basically, this information processing retrieval system that has been designed with a purpose. The objective is that to enable the searcher to reach to the information, and that information should be the information which is most effective and efficient both. One would like to have an optimal recall and precision. For any database that has information, the searcher who lays hands on this information should be able to have the maximum recall and precision, because if the recall suffers, if it is less recall, then also the searcher or the person who wants to have information is not satisfied, and if the precision is also not there, that would also affect the searcher. So you want to have an optimal recall and precision. So as an indexer, you have to take care of these things, and for that you have to understand the information retrieval system, you have to understand the indexing, and for that only we try to understand what are the different types of indexing languages and how they have been, what are the features of these different types of indexing languages. And we have already talked of classificatory language. We have discussed that earlier also in our BLI 223. But when you talk of these indexing languages, these could be in the form of list of subject headings. These could also be in the form of the different systems, as Ranganathan has given the system of chain indexing. So we need to understand these. And when you talk of a further development, you have the thesaurus as well as the thesauro facet. So we need to know the principles of these. The principle is that the indexing language says that the strives to help the indexer analyze this information, represent this information, as well as present the subject in a way that the recall and precision are optimal. So, and while the user searches, there is a search language, there is a search technique as well as a search strategy. So these are all important components of a information storage and retrieval or information processing and retrieval system that finally affect the quality of information that is retrieved, the efficiency and effectiveness of the information that is retrieved during the process. Now these indexing languages, as I mentioned, could be a list of subject headings, and as part of our curriculum we study Library of Congress list of subject headings as well as the Sears list of subject headings. And the Thesaurus facet also, one should know certain examples and see how they have their own systems, and we should also know the chain indexing system that has been given by Ranganathan. While you talk of list of subject headings, the language that they use is that they try to analyze the information in terms of categories of information which have been, as Ranganathan said, personality, matter, energy, space, time. Similarly, they say concretes and processes, techniques and tools, actions. And similarly, when you talk of the chain indexing, he tries to make use of a classification system, whether it is his own classification system, colon classification, and it can be applied to Dewey Decimal classification also. So the whole process involves analysis of the subject, and also the analysis is basically, for that one has to have a knowledge of the domain and also should able to understand the ideas expressed in terms of that, and also the level of users for whom it has been done. When I say level of users, means that in case it is a technical document, one should make use of technical vocabulary, whereas if it is a popular document, one should make use of a popular vocabulary. This is how these indexing, the different languages, as I was mentioning, that if it is a list of subject heading, it also guides an indexer as well as a searcher that one should proceed accordingly. So when you analyze it and try to represent it, we follow this basic principle that we keep in mind the user for whom it has been written. The system also takes care of that. Like Sears list of subject headings, it is for small and medium sized libraries, whereas the Library of Congress list of subject headings, it is for large libraries. So accordingly, the vocabulary is also limited in case of Sears list, whereas it is the maximum possible in case of Library of Congress list of subject headings. And it has been mentioned in their introduction also. So as students, we should know this, that why this Sears list has been designed for small and medium sized libraries, because their needs are such. Though the basic principles are the same, whether you talk of Sears list or you talk of Library of Congress list. In contrast to that, what Ranganathan says, the chain indexing is based on his postulates that he has given, but it can be used on any scheme of classification, particularly a faceted scheme of classification like his own, or he has also said that it can be used for Dewey Decimal classification also. So these are all examples of what we said as assigned indexing. Whereas when you talk of derived indexing system, we talk of keyword indexing. Now keyword indexing is that you try to identify keywords, or we call them as descriptors also, and we analyze in terms of those keywords, and these keywords are thought of in terms of the area or domain of knowledge, and also keeping in view the level of users for whom it is meant. Though generally level of user doesn't matter much when you talk of keyword indexing. And it is here that the concept of automated indexing was first applied to, that was keyword indexing. Mind you, this is derived indexing, and in derived indexing we are talking of keywords in terms of the words that have been used by the creator of the piece of information. And in the case of this keyword indexing, which is an example of derived indexing, these keywords are subject to automation, and these keywords can be contextualized also, and that is what is called the keyword in context and keyword out of context and keyword and context. There are modification of these different keyword indexing systems which have been discussed in your course also, MLII 102. So these can be rotated to provide the context that is there, though the keyword is highlighted because it is through this that a user would like to approach his or her information. So I would like to differentiate between these two, that when you talk keyword indexing, you are basically, which is an example of a derived indexing system, you are basically made to focus on the terminology that has been used. Whereas in case of assigned indexing, which I gave you the examples, these are basically the ideas behind those terms. And it is here that you need an indexing language which has its own vocabulary. So as students of indexing, whichever system of assigned indexing we are using, we should understand the language of that system. We should understand the principles that have been used. We should understand the syntax of those systems. And if we make use of those systems, I would like to guide you, students, that you read the introduction to these systems, whether it is CS list or Library of Congress list. Read the introduction to that. You will find all principles of these indexing languages have been mentioned in the initial few pages. So first of all, when you have read those introductory pages, you know the principle. Now you start having some examples in your mind and try to match how you analyze them and how they have guided you to analyze. And now I help you out in how they have guided you. You would find that in these list of subject headings, there are two types of headings, and one of those are in bold and the other ones are in non-bold. So they recommend you to index this information in bold only, which has been given in bold. They say that has to be used as indexing terms, and the others which are non-bold are not to be used as indexing terms. Why? Because it is here that the syntactics come into play. I told you the three components: semantics, syntax and syntactics. So when you talk of those terms which you do not use as index terms, they are also to be part of your information storage and retrieval system, because a user or a searcher may approach this information through these terms also. You have to guide those searchers that it is not these that have been used as approach terms. You have to use others, and for this you give references to them. So this is how this indexing language or indexing system that helps you as an indexer. Now in case of a thesaurus, when you come across a thesaurus, it has been so designed that not only the indexer but also the searcher makes use of that thesaurus. So this thesaurus is more user friendly compared to that, and it is here that when you talk of syntactics, it guides the searcher also to approach the indexing system or information storage and retrieval system, and thus reach to his or her information. So as I told you that this indexing system is in between the searcher and the creator of the information. This, when the user or the searcher approaches this indexing system, it is here that the person makes use of the thesaurus also, which is so easily designed that one can always understand. And I give you some examples of how easily designed. Like if a person has some information in her or his mind, then the thesaurus has said put that term and also related terms along with it, and guides the searcher how to go about searching it. Now it is not merely the solo terms from which the person searches, it is terms in combination, and therefore there are rules for that also, and that is what is syntax that we were referring to. Now it could be a compound subject, it could be a complex subject, it could be is more or one subject, it could be multifaceted subject. Now there are rules of the indexing language that are to be followed by the indexer, because as we had discussed last time also, the way we express in our language we cannot do in a indexing system. Those rules have to be followed, and the rules are the same. As we have talked of, if we have read the theory of indexing, they say that when a person thinks of some information, the concrete comes first to the mind of the person. Therefore, they always suggest that you index by the concrete and you then you talk of the processes and actions. Now in concretes also, this indexing language guides you to when to make use of plurals, when to make use of singulars, when to put it as noun phrases or adjectival phrases, and similarly where to use subdivisions, how subdivisions have to be used. I would recommend to you that please see some examples in the Sears list or the Library of Congress or any list of subject headings that you can have with you, and just think of some examples, or just think of a piece of information or even a book you can think of, and see how would you like to index it. And the other way is that you get hold of a book or even a chapter. I think you can start with a chapter and try to index it, and try to use any system, and also maybe some related piece of literature also, maybe a few articles you have with you, and try to see how would you like to index them, and then see how the product comes out, and then try to retrieve that information. You will see how the recall and precision is. At the same time, I would like you to see some of the indexes that are there, like the index to DDC. You will see that it is quite an exhaustive index. Similarly, the index to CCC, you will see how they have tried to take care of the syntax while they put the terminology in order, alphabetical order. They also have made use of abbreviations, like in relation to IRT they say. Similarly, they have used other terminology also to put the context with the term. It is not the single term, it is not a hanging term. The context is also mentioned there. So as a practical example, if you see these indexes of different classics with different schemes, or maybe you also have other, as I told you, list of subject headings, you will realize that to prepare an index, the context is very important. As I was mentioning about keyword indexing, even in the keyword indexing, there is a context with that, and you keep rotating that context, because it's not a linear approach. When you put it as a sentence, it is a linear approach, but a searcher does not follow a linear approach. When one accesses that information, it is multidimensional, and that multidimensionality is taken care of by the syntactics. And not only syntactics, in case of the automated indexing, how would take care of all these things, we'll discuss in our further lectures. So till now we have learnt about the intellectual organization. We have also learnt about how the different types of indexing are there and how they are different from each other. We'll continue with our discussions further, and finally we will reach the automatic indexing. We'll study about these tools and techniques in our further sessions. In case you have any questions, you are welcome to ask, and you can also send a mail to us regarding your queries. Thank you.